Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live Tuesday edition. Remember, we're on 5 days a week, right where you're watching us now. But if you ever miss the show, catch the replay anytime after. You can always get the link on my Twitter at Jim Coventry NFL, and I always post up information there. So feel free to give me a follow there and catch whatever material I have going on. Also, we'll have Brandon Kravitz on every Tuesday to go over some waiver wire choices at the end of the show. Hey, Seahawks, Giants, it was not a fun game to watch unless you were a Seahawks fan or you bet the Seahawks or you bet the under. On yesterday's show, Anthony Servino and I, a number of bets. Anthony Servino was in on Ken Walker, 79 yards and a touchdown. I was in, even though it was a chicken bet. I liked Seahawks. I liked the under, but I figured, you know what? Let me just take chance and push that away. And so I moved the line to Seahawks plus 2.5, and I moved the under to under 51 just to be safe. They easily covered without that. So if you went straight with those, you were a big winner. But again, in any case, I was getting these 50% profit boosts on DraftKings. So again, you want to make sure you cash. And sometimes, by going to those same game parlays and just manipulating the point spreads, it just kind of puts you in a good spot. Traditional teaser idea. So anyway, not much to take away from the Seahawks here. Ken Walker in the first half got that short touchdown and really hadn't done much. And then in the second half, he had a 31-yard run, kind of broke things open. And he was getting the work. I mean, obviously 17 carries to 5 for Zach Charbonnet. No doubt it's Ken Walker's job. And it's been that way, even though the gap was closing snap-wise over the last few weeks. Charbonnet had been up to 43% of the snaps in week 3. Morning, Charlene. Glad you're back. Yesterday, I had the wrong link onto the show, and I was showing a different RotoWire channel. Sorry about that. But anyway, Ken Walker back 71%. It had been trending downward 3 weeks, though, because in the opener, Walker at 63%, 61, and then 51, and then again 71. So he's the guy, no question there. The receivers, look, they didn't need to pass. They won in easy fashion. The beginning of the game was kind of a, feeling out process. They got the pick 6 also. Metcalf got the early touchdown, but he only got 4 targets. They didn't need to throw much. Drew Lock had his big completion to Noah Fant that almost went for a touchdown. That allowed Ken Walker to cash in. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 6 targets we like, 3 catches for 5 yards we don't like. Again, he'll be a great player, but I just think in this iteration of the offense and his role, we just aren't going to probably see it this year unless Lockett or Metcalf were to miss time. Charlene, good question. Jordan Addison is the question here. Jordan Addison, here's the deal. And this is things that fantasy managers will struggle with. KJ Osborne is a very good blocker. In today's NFL of a lot of zone defenses, a lot of plays are run so that the blocking receiver can do some work. He can block in the running game. He can block in the receiving game. He can change up a lot of the looks that the defense is throwing and throw them off. So KJ Osborne is a very valuable part of the offense. So there's that. So I think that's really all it is. Addison had a couple broken or misplayed defenses that worked to his advantage for a couple of long touchdowns, but he only gets 1 target in the game. And I know I'm talking about Seattle right now, but I had a good question, so we'll deal with this. And, and Cousins only threw the ball 19 times. Remember, in the first few games, 44, 44, and 50. Now you go down to 19 passes in a game they controlled, one of the few games Minnesota will be in control of this year. And, of course, Justin Jefferson gets half of those targets, 9 of 19. And Hawkinson's always involved. It just didn't leave anything for anybody else. So KJ Osborne plays 83% of the snaps. Addison 50. Now, Addison had been on an upward trajectory playing nearly 70% of the snaps, but Osborne's like a full-time player. So not in the doghouse. Game script was a real problem here. And before I get back to the Giants side of the ball, I'll take Tom's question. So Jameson Williams, it's interesting. So last year he came onto the field in the latter part of the season, didn't get a lot of playing time. He had the long touchdown. He had 1 long touchdown callback by penalty, so that never showed up in his stat line. He showed game-breaking speed. And now we look at that waiver pick on Jameson Williams, and we're like, what are we getting this year? Well, in the preseason, Dan Campbell made it clear. And what he said was, Jameson Williams needs a lot of reps. We need to use him heavily in the preseason games. He has a lot of learning to do. Well, what did Jameson Williams do? He got hurt in the preseason. He didn't get those reps. I think based on what Dan Campbell said, he is very fast, but he doesn't have the nuance and that he needs for route running yet. I am concerned about Jameson Williams. And I think this offense is very heavily predicated on the middle of the field. Now, Josh Reynolds has certainly got his. I don't know how many deep shots Jared Goff's taking, and they're going to be few and far between. I am concerned that Jameson Williams is not going to get snap share for a while here. But here's the thing. He has game-changing speed, I said. If the Lions can figure out how to utilize that, yes, he's very clearly a player who could be very, very important in fantasy leagues. But we see it now. The Lions are winning with running and defense and throwing when they have to. David Montgomery's getting done. That offensive line is getting it done. And defense is good enough to keep games somewhat in check. So there's that. All right, let me get back to the Giants side of the ball here. And questions about week 5 start sits. I am still looking back at week 4. Fantasy analysts, typically, we spend Monday and Tuesday looking back, and then Wednesday we start looking forward because we have to give you the best information. And to do that, we have to comb through everything. I got to rewatch the game film and all that. So we do that. So back to the question about Addison, his role is stable. Any game that the Vikings are going to have to throw the ball is a game that you're going to count on Cousins and their receivers. Any game that the Vikings have an advantage when they're playing like a bad team like Carolina, be careful with anybody beyond Justin Jefferson. That's how I'll frame that. All right, so let me get to the Giants side of the ball now. Look, what do we take away from this? Not a whole lot. The offensive line is decimated. Their best player, Andrew Thomas, left tackle, was out. Evan Neal, the right tackle, who they selected high in the first round last year, he hasn't figured it out yet. So there's issues with that. And he'll get it figured out, but maybe some first round picks bust, right? And their interior line, not great. Ben Bredeson's been banged up. I think he did play last night. He was inactive the prior game, but again, probably not 100%. So this isn't going well for them. And when Seattle sacks you 10 times, that's saying something very big about your offensive line. And of course, not having Saquon, right? I mean, but here's the thing we talked about in the preseason. Brian Dable was able to get by at smoke and mirrors last year. He was able to trick the league. Daniel Jones with the mobility, he had some stuff going on off of that, and it worked really, really well. Thank you, Charlene. But when we look at it, smoke and mirrors last so long, and Seattle's not a great defense, certainly. They're okay. Now, I think they're trending toward middling. I think they're trending. They were worse than that last year. But I think we saw last year when the Giants, I know it was the Eagles and they were playing at a high level. And week 1, it was the Cowboys and they were playing at an insane level. But the thing is, there were no more smoke and mirrors to go to. The film's out. And at some point, you have to have players. You know, I know Nate Tice I believe it's Nate Tice. And it might be Ben Solak. One of these two mentioned always, you got to win with Jimmys and Joes, not X's and O's. You got to have players. You can have all the great scheme in the world. But at some point, you have to have players that can cash in. And right now, the Giants don't have that. The silver lining for the Giants from fantasy is Wan'Dale Robinson. And he may be on the waiver wire in leagues. Now, it depends how, if you're in a 10-team league, might not be a big deal. But look, he had 6 catches, 5 for 40, and it eased him in last week. I picked him up in a couple of leagues that are, tough to get free agents in. But if Wan'Dale Robinson is available, he is going to see a lot of short targets, and he can run after the catch. So healthy Wan'Dale Robinson could be a real nice boost to your fantasy roster. So definitely make considerations for him. And then, of course, we still can't judge much till Saquon Barkley's back. High ankle sprain. He's now missed 2 games, and they had him doubtful this week. They're playing it as if he's coming back soon, which would indicate he could be back. I just don't think he'll be at 100%. And if we have Barkley not at 100% and defense is not respecting the passing game, Barkley's going to see an awful lot of attention. He needs to be 100%. Of course, if he's healthy, you put him in your fantasy lineup. But I don't think you're getting that first-round pick return until he is at full strength. All right, let's talk some risers and fallers here. If you're enjoying the show, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, especially if you're on RotoWire YouTube. And we will move to some risers and fallers again. Bottom of the hour, Brandon Kravitz coming in to talk some waivers. So Matthew Stafford, look, he is averaging 300 yards within a couple of yards. He's real close, right on the cusp of that, but he's right around 300 yards. The touchdowns haven't been there. He had overtime last week to get him there as a one touchdown each of the last 3 games. Been fine for fantasy. Not like crushing it, but certainly you're not arguing, right? So when we look at Matthew Stafford, he gets Cooper Kupp back. Right now, he's dealing. Matthew Stafford for his career, he goes on hot streaks, and then without a reason, he goes on cold streaks. So we got to understand that that's part of him over the history of his career. At some point, Matthew Stafford's going to go on a cold streak. His history teaches us that. Now, Sean McVay, Brian, welcome. You know what? I was talking Giants, and after Stafford, I can finish up because that's something I didn't cover. I will go back to that. So, but Matthew Stafford right now, ride him. He's hot. They're playing the Eagles this week. The Eagles can be attacked in the middle, and I think Sean McVay can expose that greatly with his receiver. He has a lot of plays that get schemed in the middle of the field, and the pass rush isn't what it was last year. So I think despite the sounding difficult matchup, I think you can keep rolling if you've been rolling with Stafford. Keep rolling with him, but understand the downturn is going to come. His history has taught us that. It's been most of his career. All right, Darren Waller, let's go back to him because that was the Giants game. I didn't talk about him, and I probably should have. Waller is not working out in the offense right now. Not his fault. He's a very talented player. We understand that. Waller had, so in the opening game, let's see what he had. Let me just look at his numbers here for him. He had a 3 for 36 in the opener. We didn't like that. 6 for 76 on 8 targets against the Cardinals. We like that. But now the last 2 weeks have not been good again. Waller had a 3 for 21 yesterday and a 3 for 21 the prior week. Right now, I mean, it's hard to get a productive tight end outside the top, 5 or 6. So obviously you've got to ride him and hope things get better. But right now, the state of the passing attack is a mess. Now, if they get Andrew Thomas back, it helps, but it's not going to be like a season changer for them. I think your expectations of Waller have to be significantly changed right now. You have to look at him as a player that he could have a good week. He could have that 80-yard game, but I don't think we're going to see the preseason Waller where he is just dominating, dunking on everybody and calling it a day. He'll be good enough. Probably won't be worth the draft capital that you used on him. It's the Giants' dysfunctional offense. It's not Waller, and that's a problem. And defenses know he's the one they got to worry about. Maybe Wan'Dale Robinson changes that equation, but he's a short game guy. I think teams will live with that. The Waller's a seam stretcher. You could get big plays there. I think defenses make him more of the focus. So for fantasy, right now he's a bust. Not his fault, but that's all we're dealing with is fantasy football right now. But again, if Andrew Thomas comes back, maybe the rest of the line could get a boost from him. Maybe Evan Neal figures it out, but right now I'm not optimistic. All right, quick on the quarterback risers. Josh Dobbs, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, look, he's running the ball. At least 41 yards in 3 straight games. Passing yardage, he has a couple games over 228 in his last 3. He gets at least a touchdown every game. And actually with the rushing, he has 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games. He's don't know how he's getting it done. The Michael Wilson game came out of nowhere where he got him for 2 touchdowns. I'm sure the defense wasn't even thinking about him because film had shown they hadn't been using him, and it worked. Rondale Moore's been a ghost. They had him in a running game against Dallas 2 weeks ago, but they're not really using him as a receiver. Marquise Brown is definitely getting it done. So, but Josh Dobbs, if you're new to 2-quarterback league and you're up against the buys or injuries, if he's still out on the waiver wire, in usually 2-quarterback leagues, everybody's taking up if they have a pulse. But if he's out there, definitely take him. You're welcome, Brian. Good to see you too. All right, running back risers. It's obvious, but we have to call it out. David Montgomery. Now, remember, he gets hurt during the week 2 game, so he had 16 carries, but he left the game, didn't come back, and he didn't play in week 3. But look at, he's got insane usage right now. He had over 20 carries in the opener, 21 carries. He had 32 last week. He's seeing about a target a game, so he's not a big factor in the passing game here. But picking up where Jamal Williams left off last year, the Cats got 5 touchdowns in 3 games. So, look, sometimes it's difficult because we know what David Montgomery's been in his career, but in fantasy football, it's very important to not get take lock. Once you have a certain opinion of a player, that player could change very quickly. This is not David Montgomery of the Bears. This is David Montgomery of the Lions. They have an excellent offensive line, an excellent run scheme, and they use him and they dedicate to him. And right now, if you're not ranking him as a top 10 running back, maybe PPR he slides a slight bit, but if you're not ranking him as a top 10 running back, your preseason observation or outlook is clouding your judgment on him. His role is his role right now. Even the week he got hurt, 16 for 67 and a touchdown. And that's his role. Is he going to get 25 carries every week? No, I don't think so. But he's getting work. And until we're proven otherwise, you have to ride David Montgomery. Devon Achane. Wow. I mean, only 8 carries last week. His first 2 were touchdowns. He gets a 50-yard run in garbage time, 55-yard run, but he's electric. And with the way they navigate him into his space, that run game is more refined than it was last year. The blocking scheme, and they lost Teron Armstead, their left tackle, during that game. The run scheme is real. That's a San Francisco run system. It works. We know that. And Achane gets into the hole quickly and explodes. So minimum RB2, but he gets a couple more carries. He's flirting with top 15 running back with upside weeks. We've seen that already, 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he scores 2 more last week. You're starting him. You are not, there's not a scenario unless you're in a 8-team or 10-team league and you're loaded. I don't think you can sit Achane. I don't think there's a scenario. I don't even care who the opponent is. The scheme of the running game precludes that. Isaiah Pacheco's trending up too. And his usage is going up each week. Remember, he came into the season nicked up. He had 2 off-season injuries. He had surgery on the shoulder and the wrist, I believe. And, he went from 12 touches to 15 and 3 targets, and he goes up to 20 carries and 3 targets. He's the guy. I mean, he is the guy right now. And remember, we talk about this. Defenses are never going to play the run against Kansas City. You can't. Even though the receivers aren't great, Patrick Mahomes is. And so defenses always have to play back to try to limit the explosives and make them run 15-play drives, 18-play drives, and they don't run that many, but that's their goal. And you figure that up, holding penalty, a mistake, and you get a turnover. So Pacheco is going to keep getting good yards per carry. He's over 5 in his last, 3 games, I believe. He's close. If not, he's real close to it. But it's going to continue, and he's going to get touchdown opportunities. So just right now, he's not heavily used as a receiver, but 3 targets in his last 2 games. So there's that. But I think you firmly consider him like top 20-ish running back because he's going to get that usage. I do worry at some point he breaks down. He runs very violent. And I know his height and weight, they look good, but he's not a big dude. And he will take big hits. And that's why the 2 surgeries in the last offseason. But ride him. Keep riding him. And if he makes it all through the whole season, beautiful. If he doesn't, make sure you have depth. Jaylen Warren. I talk about it frequently. I know the fantasy community obviously has him ahead of Najee Harris right now. Harris, when he's on the field, he's breaking tackles 99th percentile. Average yards after contact, 99th percentile. He's insane. He's playing well, but they stink. And they fall behind. And they get in second and long. And they get in third like this Matt Canada's horrible. Well, Jaylen Warren's the beneficiary here. His yards per carry aren't great. I don't think he's hit 4 in any game. 8 for 29, 8 for 29, 6 for 23 for 6. Not a good runner. And that's been against light boxes. When he comes in the game, nickel and dime defense. And he's not getting close to 4 yards a carry, but 6 targets in 3 or 4 games with a low of 4. In PPR leagues, that's gold. I mean, he's caught 18 passes in 4 games. So he is a PPR running back too because of the catches. Not getting in the end zone. So what? So Jaylen Warren, that are maybe 24-ish running back because of the PPR only, half PPR, more like a top 30-ish. Standard, now you're looking like top 33 or so. But regardless, he's going to keep getting his work because the offense stinks. They're terrible. And they're going to have passing downs, and he's the passing back. Now, if Kenny Pickett has to miss time, it sounds like it's less serious than we thought with his knee. I don't know if Mitchell Trubisky is going to dump the ball as well as Kenny Pickett did. So there's that. But it's problematic. All right. Remember, the weekend live stream starts that. I did that on Saturday last week. We had a really good showing on that. The powers that be think I should do it on Sunday, even though it's an NFL game. In weeks 5 and 6, we have another London game. So we're going to do that on Sunday. Hopefully you can make it. If you have the game on, hopefully you can have this in the background, and that would be great. But we're going to go to Sunday to do the starts of Sagar's in the house, and I see Igor's in the house. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. All right. Some wide receiver risers. Remember, bottom of the hour, Brandon Kravitz coming in, talk some waivers with you. DJ Moore's a huge riser here. Targets haven't been great. Week 1, he had that 2 for 25 against Green Bay, just miserable. But since 7, 6, 9 targets, it's going well. And touchdowns in 2 of the last 3, 100 yards in 2 of the last 3. We talked about in the live stream this weekend. People were talking about starting DJ Moore. Yes, start him, I said. Patrick Surtain, I looked it up, only played man 29% of the time. That means he was either in zone or he was with the zone. And that meant DJ Moore was going to be able to get away from him. And he did. And DJ Moore took advantage. DJ Moore's a star receiver. And we're seeing at least the Bears are smart enough to get him the ball. And he's going to continue to do well. He'll have down weeks like everybody else, but keep rolling with him. Another player on the rise, I mentioned him earlier when I mentioned Joshua Dobbs, Marquise Brown. And by the way, Igor, I'll be mentioning Cole Kmet, the tight end risers, in probably a minute or two here. Marquise Brown. Well, Joshua Dobbs has figured it out. And not great, but look for what he is and what he has around him. Offensive line is better than we thought. Adding Paris Johnson has helped. Some of those veterans are playing a little better than we expected. So the offensive line play in Arizona is not terrible this year. And look, they played the 49ers and they held up. So I think this team is a lot better than any of us, me included, could have imagined. So, but Marquise Brown, targets 10, 7, and 10 in the last 3, at least 54 yards in each game. He scored a couple of touchdowns. He has a connection with Dobbs. He gets open quickly. He's a tiny dude, but it doesn't matter. He's super fast, and they're getting him the ball. So right now, look, I know Arizona's had some leads, but the game script's going to necessitate them passing the ball. So Marquise Brown is relevant. I moved him way up in my rest of season rankings. I moved him inside the top 30 because I had him out only because of quarterback. I didn't know and perceived offensive line. Thought that was going to be a problem. And obviously Christian Kirk's a riser. And, the targets have been up and down, 3, 14, 6, 12. But they are making him a priority in the offense. And he's had well more targets than Calvin Ridley in the last 3 games. Maybe it continues, maybe it doesn't. But at least we know last year Christian Kirk performed extremely well. And we know that he'll continue to play extremely well given the role in the offense. So I think that's a good thing. So we'll look at Christian Kirk as a player who we're going to play him. We're going to play him each week. We're not going to have any questions about it. He'll have down games. Sometimes we have to know that going in. Tight end risers. Cole Kmet. And it wasn't just a 2-touchdown game and the 85 yards on 9 targets last week. And he was a player, we talked about on the prop show. Bet him on the prop show. His yardage prop was 28 yards. He'll crush that. And obviously he had that crushed early. It was a great fantasy play. I don't remember if I recommended him in DFS. I hope I did, but I don't remember if I did or didn't. Anyway, 7 targets in week 1, 44 yards, 6 targets in week 2, 38 yards. He had the 2 for 22, last week, whatever. That's a floor game. It's not a 0. And then last week he goes off. I mentioned this when I was breaking the game down. Chase Claypool's out of favor now. They told him not to come back this week either. Kmet's their only big presence in the middle of the field. A lot of the Bears' passes have to go to the middle of the field, especially when pressure comes. Cole Kmet has already shown in his time with Justin Fields, they have chemistry. They work together very well. Cole Kmet right now, The upside won't be ridiculous. Obviously he had 29 fantasy points or whatever it was this past week, but fine enough. But Cole Kmet remember, the top 12 tight end bar is not a high bar. He's in that. He is in that. He's getting the targets. He's a good enough player. He's very good in the red zone. He's definitely better than a lot of these players who are not performing at all. And Juwan Johnson got hurt this last week. But the other thing is they got 3 receivers. There aren't enough targets for him. So players like him, dump him. Cole Kmet, get him ahead of these guys. He is a top 10. You're going to have a couple down weeks, but start him. And look, I'm going to stop banging the drum at some point, but I have to keep banging it because I saw him available in some leagues still, and I'm in some fairly competitive leagues. Jake Ferguson, unless you only roster one tight end and you have a very good one, you got to roster him. 2 weeks ago, 58 yards. This past week, 77. 7 targets in 3 of 4 games. He's regularly targeted in the red zone. That's why his depth of target is low, because it's a lot of red zone targets he gets too. The touchdowns will come. Dak Prescott loves throwing his tight ends. We talked about this. He always has, and he's continuing now. Yeah, Luke Schoonemacher did get a red zone target, end zone target. Fine, whatever. There's enough to go around. Jake Ferguson is the guy. He shouldn't, again, unless you're only rostering one tight end. And honestly, I would probably think his floor is higher than Kmet's. I think Kmet has a higher ceiling week to week because he's their touchdown guy. All right. Remember, you get a free RotoWire trial for 2 days with no credit card needed, just an email address. See what we have to offer over on the site. I got a few articles I wrote up from Sunday as well. And you go to rotowire.com/Jim. We'll set you up there. Again, rotowire.com/Jim. No credit card needed. Let's talk about some fallers. About 5 minutes, we got Brandon Kravitz coming in. We'll see what fallers we get through. Obviously, Joe Burrow is a faller. It's not his fault, but his calf is. He's got a bad calf. Threw for 165 yards. He's thrown 0 touchdowns in 3 or 4 games. Right now, you can't trust him as a top 12 quarterback. Can he come out next week and throw for 350 and 3 touchdowns? Yeah, I guess he can. But his calf's telling me, no, that's not going to happen. Until I see his calf, and obviously T. Higgins broke a rib. All the short passes, the quick passes. Tyler Boyd trends up because of this. His usage has gone up because of Burrow's injury. But Joe Burrow right now, no. I mean, they're playing at the Cardinals this week, so there's that. So maybe he gets something, a little boost there. But if you have if you have CJ Stroud, I'm starting CJ Stroud. Jared Goff's at home this week. I'm starting Jared Goff. Jordan Love, probably. But Joe Burrow right now, love him. He'll be fine at some point. Can't start him right now unless you have no other option. Jahmyr Gibbs, huge faller. He's getting targets. Well, so more or less. He had two target games. He had a 9 and a 5, but he has 5 yards per catch. 14 catches, 70 yards. That's it. And this is the guy who's supposed to be the dynamite receiver. Not his fault again. They haven't figured out how to use him. So there's that. Again, Ben Johnson, great offensive coordinator, getting a ton out of his offense, getting a lot out of Montgomery, getting the usual out of St. Brown, Sam Laporta. They haven't figured out Gibbs. And Gibbs has the 17 carry game, but remember, that's when Monty was out. Otherwise, he gets 7 or 8 carries a game, and that's it. So right now, you can't really count on him for much. He's not putting even PPR. He had the 7-catch game. That was 39 yards. He had 12 fantasy points PPR in that game. So Jahmyr Gibbs is a flex right now. I don't know what's changing anytime soon. Maybe when they have a bye. Sometimes in a bye week, teams fix things. I would hold out optimism for that. And maybe because he's seen targets, maybe he's somebody that somebody would overpay for in a trade. Think about it. All right. I see. Josh is here. I didn't even see the ESBC. Yeah, Josh Viscai, one of the best gamblers I know that's out there. And definitely, Josh, if you, I can remember, Josh Viscai. I can never remember Twitter handles. But yeah, Josh is doing hot in the Circa Million. He asked me for pick each week. He doesn't need my help. He's way better than I am. He's really an outstanding. You should follow his show, ESBC Sports Betting and Financial Podcast. I put it up there on the screen for you, so check that out. But Josh really brings it, 100%. Ramondre Stevenson's a faller. Absolutely. The offensive line's bad. Defenses don't respect the passing game. He can't sniff 3 yards per carry in any game. His best game was a 19 for 59. Receiving yardage, So week 1, he had 64. Since 10, 3, 10. You might have to start him. He's getting volume. There's that. But again, he's a guy who's not sniffing PPR value every week. Week 2 is okay. It was okay. He had 15 points, but he hasn't been close to that since. So that's problematic. Tyler Algier, I thought we'd be a flex every week. His snap share has gone down each week. He went in the 50s, like 53. He went down to 44. He went down to 30. He went down to 26. Not looking good for him right now. Brandon Kravitz, before I formally bring you in, I'm going to talk about one more faller, and then we'll get you rolling. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. Let's hear it.
All right. So Jaylen Waddle, I'm getting a lot of questions about him. Here's what I want you to know about Jaylen Waddle. The talent is off the charts. No questions at all. Since the week 12 bye last year, he has seen 5, 6, or 7 targets in every game. This year it's been 5s and 6s. So this year, not a 7-target game. Last year after week 12, and that includes the 1 playoff game. So it's a pretty good body of work. Tyreek Hill gobbles up the targets. There's some leftovers for Jaylen Waddle. Now, fortunately, he could get you 70, 80 yards, get an occasional 100-yard game because of his crazy speed. But his upside on a weekly basis is capped by that lack of targets. Any words on Jaylen Waddle, Brandon?
I'm genuinely surprised because it seemed like last year, the stats back it up, that they were able to split work more evenly between the two of them. Tua does a good job of distributing the football. I know Tyreek Hill is the number one guy, but it's not like he's someone who locks in on one target and doesn't know how to read the field. He had his issues this past week with Buffalo. Their front four was tenacious, but I'm surprised that I can't quite figure it out. He had the concussion. I think better days are ahead. He's a guy that I'm not completely out on, but it is frustrating because he's now a part of the conversation of should I start him, should I sit him, when he was somebody that we viewed as an auto start based on where we were drafting him.
Exactly. Brandon, in the preseason, what I talked about, I was high on Waddle like everybody else because I know his talent. But what I said was, even going into last year, Tyreek Hill, I want to say, had like 158 targets with the Chiefs, and he was complaining, I don't get the ball enough. It was like almost 10 targets a game. And I said, well, hell, if he's complaining with Patrick Mahomes by not getting, if he goes to Miami and they're bringing him in, they traded for him, they paid him, they are forced to give him all the targets he wants because he'll be a diva if he doesn't get them, and you don't want him upset. So it's at the expense of Waddle. But like you said, the talent is real. Hopefully there's enough volume to get things kicking and he can get it. But right now he's a floor. It's a high floor, but he's not a ceiling play, and that's not what you drafted him for. All right, Brandon.
It does seem like we're seeing that with a few of these guys that we drafted, maybe pushed them up a little bit too far in the ranks before the season started. These number 2 guys, Devontae Smith has had a couple of big games. T. Higgins has not been productive. Jaylen Waddle lacking that starter production. So maybe it's an opportunity for us to reevaluate that number 2 that we started to push a little bit too far up the wide receiver rankings.
That's an astute observation that you're right. Those are 3 high-profile number 2s that are just, they can't get in the gravitational pull of those elite number 1s. That's a fantastic call. Something we'll need to consider when we're setting our DFS lineups as well going forward. Brandon Kravitz, every Tuesday, we're always excited to bring you in for some waiver wire talk. Who are some quarterbacks you like?
Well, I'll start by saying it's a little ugly to navigate this terrain carefully. This is not we don't have a Devin Achane or Puka Nacua on the list, but I still think there's some value to be found. So we'll start with a couple of streaming options at quarterback. Sam Howell, this is very simple analysis here, Jim. Sam Howell going up against the Bears, and Zach Wilson, plug your nose and get ready for this one, going up against the Broncos. Number 1 and number 2 in terms of points given up to the quarterback position for both the Bears and the Broncos. Howell had a nice bounce back after that Bills beatdown. And Zach Wilson, I'm shocked, but he showed some real life on Sunday night. Even got the Patrick Mahomes endorsement. I don't know if you saw that video that's out there. He called him Aaron Rodgers after the game. If Zach Wilson can start to really feel himself and play with confidence, man, nothing will open up fantasy success for you quite like playing against the Denver Broncos defense. So I actually think you can play him this week.
You know what? It makes sense in the super flex scenario, and you have to need two quarterbacks. And with Howell, he never met a sack he didn't like. The Bears are incapable of getting to the quarterback. So you're right. That's a perfect storm. We could see the best of Sam Howell in this game because he should be kept extremely clean. So that's exciting. And with Wilson, good call on that. He had his game. Hopefully he can take advantage of the bad opponent. And like you're kind of intimating, we know Robert Saleh wants to get his confidence up. And this is a great chance to build on that Sunday night game against a patsy opponent and making sure that you can actually do something with that. So great call on that as well. How about running back?
Jaleel McLaughlin is really the only guy I've got my eyes locked on at the running back position off the waiver wire. Somehow owned in 2% of leagues. I would love to know who's in these leagues that already have him on the roster. McLaughlin looked like one of the most explosive running backs really in the league over the weekend. He definitely looked like the most explosive running back in the Broncos backfield. And this is a team that's struggling to find life anywhere. Sean Payton is not messing around anymore. So it's going to be a complete meritocracy. If you play well, you're going to get time. 10 total touches last week, and he made the most of it. 104 yards and a touchdown, and he looked really good doing it, which is the most important part. And I think you have to take these players seriously, especially as I opened with, there's a reason why I mentioned this. The waiver wire is barren this week for the most part. So someone like that, and in another week, you might go, yeah, I'm not going to take that seriously. If you're looking to add depth to your roster, this is a guy that you should definitely have your eyes on. Don't go crazy in terms of a fab budget, but he is somebody worth rostering at this point. P. Ryan has not shown to be valuable, and Javonte Williams already dealing with an injury coming off of that ACL from last year.
Yeah, good call on that. Yeah, Javonte left that game with a hip injury. We don't know how serious or not that is. If he misses time, that would be really significant. But like you said, regardless, McLaughlin needs to be on rosters if you have the space for him. There are some tighter rosters, shorter leagues where you can't, but if there's any potential, we all need running backs. And like Brandon said, this is a player that has juice. He's shown us, now he showed us in a real game. So that definitely has some potential there as well. Wide receivers, who do you got, Brandon?
All right, I actually really like the wide receiver group here, and it's not every week that the Cardinals are going to throw the ball 41 times, but they will be in numerous negative game scripts throughout the season, and that's going to benefit these Cardinals wideouts, most notably Michael Wilson, who's the new kid on the block. Even with Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz gobbling up 20 targets between the two of them on Sunday, Wilson still had 7 catches, 76 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and this isn't a guy that's completely coming out of nowhere. There was a lot of preseason hype around him as a 3rd-round pick. He really shined in camp. He looks the part. I'm excited about Michael Wilson moving forward. And we've seen Josh Dobbs can support fantasy production, and I like it even better when Kyler Murray, if he ever gets back on the field. So I'm not afraid of this Cardinals offense as much as I thought I was going to be coming into the season.
And then how about over in Dallas? A lot of people were hot on Brandon Cooks in the preseason. I think somebody's outplaying him that we weren't counting on so much. Who do you like as another waiver pickup?
Yeah, perhaps we shouldn't have slept so hard on Michael Gallup. And when he's been on the field, he's been a nice player for the Cowboys. He's led the team in receptions the last 2 weeks. And apparently Brandon Cooks, as you mentioned, is just window dressing at this point. He's been invisible in this offense. But Gallup is a guy that Dak obviously trusts. And he's my second favorite wide receiver that's available on most waiver wires this week. I think he's a guy that is a really nice depth piece for your roster, if you're trying to bolster that receiving unit you've got.
Now, if I'm correct on this next player, and I have to rewatch this game. I was watching it on Game Box, so I didn't quite see. I think he caught a trick pass from a non-quarterback, but maybe I'm wrong. Dalton Schultz came up with a touchdown. But Dalton Schultz is somebody who got dropped in a lot of leagues, Brandon. Why should we be looking at him?
I mean, it's strictly based on the rising tide lifts all boats theory. It's more about the Texans' offense than it is about Schultz. He caught a touchdown, so that makes it a little more appealing. even if it was, I'd have to go back and look at this.
Yeah, I have to too.
It's interesting. But even if it was trickery, just the fact that the Texans offense is humming is really the reason why he's on this list. I want pieces of good offenses, and the Texans are showing that they're actually one of the better offensive units in the league. Schultz got cooking for the first time this year. Perhaps he can build off of it. 3 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Make of that what you will, but you want tight ends on high-scoring offenses. It's hard to get excited about tight ends in general, especially the ones that are off the waiver wire in more than 50% or less than 50% of leagues. Bobby Slowick comes from the 49ers. He's getting a lot of love right now in Houston. They had George Kittle, who they produced to be quite the fantasy asset. So, perhaps Dalton Schultz gets more involved as these defensive coordinators that go up against Houston have to spend more time focusing on Nico Collins and Tank Dell. These are very real threats. Maybe it opens up the middle of the field.
And I did look at it while you were talking. Devin Singletary threw the 6-yard pass to Dalton Schultz. Yeah, I knew at the corner, Mike, there were so many games going on. It was like, oh my, but today I do my big rewatch of the film. But that was fun. How about defensively? I know sometimes we need that streamer defense. Who might we look at this week, Brandon?
Actually, and I'll give you that in a moment. I forgot to mention one other tight end that I think, and this is really just for deeper leagues, probably 14 teamers, but I think it's a guy that you can keep your eye on at the very least is Kylen Granson of the Colts. This guy's gotten at least four targets in every game this season. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like they're using him in big moments. The Colts are in a lot of games late, and he seems to be part of that part of their plan of attack of getting down the field in crucial moments. He's clearly part of the hierarchy of the Colts passing game. So he's just a guy, I'm not saying rush to add him, but just keep him in the back of your mind. DST, let's go with the Detroit Lions. They've been getting after the passer with regularity. Aiden Hutchinson looks great. They could take on a Panthers team that appears to be allergic to the end zone. So I'm going to go with Detroit.
Oh, they are allergic to the end zone. I love that call. On the offensive line in Carolina, we thought the tackle play would be really good. Ike Ekwonu's kind of slid in his second year, not quite what he was. Taylor Moton not getting it done. And they're both of their guards have not played this year. So this is very, very attackable here. So great call there. Brandon, tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
At Brandon Kravitz across all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Love to chat about whatever situation you are facing in fantasy. I know that everybody is dealing with something that's very personal to you, your league, and your roster construction. So, I'm happy to go through all of that. You can also catch me on the Fantasy Bites, all part of the RotoWire podcast network, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I give you 5 minutes of exactly what you need, fantasy headlines and a bet for that particular day, whatever is going on. And today we got a nice little slate of baseball, so go and check that out, and I'll give you a bet at the end of each episode.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you definitely follow Brandon, follow his content. The man is outstanding. He's on iHeartRadio in Orlando.
You are correct. Yes, I left that part out. You can also catch me 3 to 6 p.m. every single weekday on the iHeartRadio app just by searching 96.9 The Game.
Now, remember, this show, we don't do Wednesdays and Thursdays. I have to take a couple days off here and there. Old man's got to rest once in a while. But back on Friday with Adam Thompson of Bookies for some gambling. John Ryan on Saturday with more gambling and DFS. And then Sunday, the live sit stream. Got to say that slowly so I don't get an H in the wrong word. For Brandon Kravitz, I'm Jim Coventry. Everybody have a